Henry. In that case, you were just the well-to-do's extremely eccentric and generally embarrassing cross to bear. With the exception of her sister Emma, eccentric and embarrassing seemed to be genetic. The burning desire to stay put, thankfully, was not. And as soon as she got her feet back under her, Sam thought, she'd be right back down the road and on her way. It had been a long time, but she wasn't stupid enough to think that things had changed here. Nothing ever changed here. Still, as Sam pulled up the long gravel drive, she was unable to stop the overwhelming sense of relief that hit her as she got her first look at the house. It rose tall and stately against the backdrop of the sea and cloudy sky beyond, all arches and sharp angles, with a wide and inviting wraparound porch. The tower room and widow's walk still looked hopelessly romantic, even to a cynic like her, and despite its age and faded white siding, the house managed to be both grand and welcoming. This had been her family's land since the beginning, and somehow it still managed to look more like home than her tiny apartment ever had. That was part of the legend of the town, that the original families were bound here, fated to return again and again, just like the waves that crashed against the rocky shore. It was one of the reasons she stayed as far away as possible. Fate, like most things about Harvest Cove, just pissed her off. Her mom had painted the shutters to match the mailbox. Sam grinned and wondered how often the sight of them made flames shoot out of Emma's ears. Emma, as she liked to remind her wayward sister during their occasional phone calls, was a respectable businesswoman now. Sam guessed that meant the stick Emma seemed to have wedged up her ass was not painted this particular shade of purple. Sam pulled around by the old carriage house that had long ago been converted into a garage, then parked. There was an unfamiliar pickup there, alongside her mother's little yellow VW Beetle. She briefly considered wandering down to the water and hanging out until the company took off, then discarded the idea. News of her return would get around soon enough anyway. At least there was no way it was Emma. Whoever owned this truck seemed to enjoy driving through mud. She killed the engine, sat for a moment, took a deep breath. This is it, she thought. I'm back. The urge to put the car in reverse and hightail it back out of town was tempered, more than she'd expected, by the thought of heading back to New York to continue beating her head against a seemingly endless series of brick walls. The mild nausea she felt at even considering it had her opening the car door and planting her scuffed black boots on the gravel. The tiny, high-pitched sound coming from somewhere nearby didn't even register until she'd heard it 3 or 4 times. Meow. Sam frowned, shoving her sunglasses to the top of her head as she walked toward the sound, every footstep crunching loudly. She paused, waiting. Meow. It seemed to be coming from underneath the muddy pickup, and it was definitely feline. A stray, maybe. Her mother hadn't had a pet since Cody, their big golden retriever, had passed away right before Sam had left for college. She crouched down beside the truck and leaned over to try to get a look at what was underneath. A pair of bright green eyes peered back at her, looking much too large for the tiny black shadow they belonged to. Whether it was the long trip, the fact that she'd been skirting the edge of a full-on breakdown for weeks, or just the sight of something even more pathetic, not to mention much cuter, than herself, Sam melted. "Aww," she heard herself coo. "You're just a kitten. Here, kitty. Come here." She reached under the truck, slowly stretching out her hand toward the crouching shadow and expecting little more than a hiss, and maybe something fun like tetanus, for her trouble. Instead, she was surprised when she touched soft, warm fur, the kitten actually moving into her hand so she could draw it out. It was little more than a ragged bag of bones, Sam realized as she pulled the kitten from beneath the truck. Pitch black, with ears much too big for its head, it started to purr for all it was worth the instant she cradled it against her chest, interjecting the occasional pitiful mew, just in case Sam even considered putting it back down. "Don't worry,"